I'm going to be going through book 29 of Ihya Ulum ad-Din Al-Ghazali, book 29 of The Revival of the Religious Sciences, on Condemnation of Pride and Self-Admiration, Kitab Dhamm al-Kibr wal-Ujub. Now, what is this? Islamic Text Society, Cambridge, they print, these, this is what, like 100-something page, like 160-page book. So it's a book that's really just a chapter from a much larger book, The Revival. So, why, though? I'm saying this more for myself, so I remember as I'm going through this, what made me want to sit down and actually record this and take these notes. And it's, I'm someone who has become more religious recently over the last few years from a very irreligious atheistic life. I think that was somewhat of a trend, especially since the past 5 years. And I think if you're on Twitter, you can see it. There's a lot of people all of a sudden, it's part of their identity now is a religion. There's trad cats out there and all that kind of stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying something that I noticed, and I noticed it in myself, which is one of the reasons I picked this book up to read it, is the pride that comes along with people who turn towards a religious life. They live their religious life, but with a lot of pride. And it can be a downfall. So I am just trying to be careful and looking in my own self for traces of pride, trying to root it out. And I mean, if you read deep into a lot of religious stuff, at least what I've been reading lately, you can see how pride is linked to just so many other hindrances on, I don't want to say the word, but spiritual journey. I don't like this journey word, but I think you get the point. I hope you do, at least. So, I'm going to just be going through passages that I put a little post-it on as I read this book. Basically, this is just to put it out there, something to listen to. I love just listening to podcasts. I have an office job, so I can do that. This is for people who may never read this book or don't have time to read it or, just want to hear what's inside it. So, and the first one kind of explains one reason why pride is something to look for in yourself and, maybe get rid of. Also, the heat is on. It's very cold here. Please forgive me. Trains come by. Whatever. The heat will go off soon. Anyways, so here we go. Here's the first one I highlighted. Muhammad ibn al-Hasan ibn Ali, God be pleased with both of them, said, "No amount of pride enters into the heart of a person except that his intellect diminishes proportionate to the amount of pride that entered into him, however much or little." So, however much pride comes into you, that's how much your intellect diminishes. That makes a lot of sense. There's, what is it? I can't tip of my tongue. But just, the image of you think you know everything, so that makes you stupid. You know what I mean? So, before I fall into the trap of just wanting to expound on every single thing, let's just move on to the next one. It is related that Mutarrif ibn Abdullah ibn al-Shakhir saw al-Muhallab while he was strutting about in a silk overcoat. He said, "O Abdullah, God and his messenger hate this gate." Al-Muhallab said, "Don't you know who I am?" Mutarrif said, "Certainly, I do know who you are. You were at first a disgusting drop of sperm, and in the end you will be a filthy corpse. And between these two stages, you are the bearer of feces." Al-Muhallab went away and gave up this gate. So, reading this again, this kind of reminds me of... Alright, let's see. It's about... Remember... So, this helps you deal with pride. It helps you not be prideful if you remember this. So, remember where you were and what you ultimately will be in this world, in the dunya. You came from sperm. So someone can say, yeah, but if a great being, a holy man comes from sperm, that's fine. That's something that can be acknowledged. But we know in the Islamic tradition, sperm is not, it's impure. You have to do a ghusl after, jinns and stuff like that. So, I've lost my train of thought, but I think, sperm, great man, okay, yeah, but sperm we know is impure, so it's just remembering you came from an impure thing. Just don't be so prideful. Don't get carried away with yourself. You came from sperm, and in the end, you will be a corpse. Now, this remembering of yourself being a corpse too helps you remember that yes, you will die. You have this life to work towards the akhirah, al-akhirah, the afterlife. And it reminds me also a little bit. I was reading yesterday an article or an essay in some book about like serial killing and stuff. But it was some guy trying to make some connection between puns and calligraphy that he called calligraphy, Kali. And he was just talking about the goddess Kali from the Hindu tradition. And he was just saying that this meditating on this goddess just helps you remember the pain and the suffering and the death of life, the things that scared Siddhartha to go meditate and find enlightenment, become a Buddha. Broad strokes here, guys. I'm painting with broad strokes to make these connections. So, anyways, I hope I didn't ramble too much there. Here we go again. The Prophet ﷺ said, "There are 4 things that God gives only to those whom he loves. Silence, which is the beginning of worship, trust in God, humility, and renunciation of the world." So I think I highlighted this one just because I'm really trying to look into what exactly renunciation, zuhud, is in the Islamic tradition, because I don't think, there's no monkery in Islam. You don't just go be a hermit or a monk, So I'm trying to get a better understanding of zuhud, renunciation, in Islam, because I'm just fascinated by asceticism, monks, sadhus, all that kind of stuff. And on this channel, I plan on doing a lot more about that kind of stuff. It's just something to look out for. But yeah, there's no, in Islam, there is no monk. Your life. So if anyone just needs to hear it or wants to hear it, in Islam, you don't go live in a monastery and retire from the world and, that kind of stuff. The religion is designed so that your daily life is somewhat of a monastery. One thing, there's a perpetual fast. Again, not every day, meaning you don't eat, but you fast your whole life from alcohol, pork, that kind of stuff. And the 5 daily prayers, you do the 5 daily prayers so that you don't have to get out of the world while in this world and go live in a monastery. It's embedded in the daily actions of everyday life. Ooh, one moment. All right. Sorry, just making sure I was still recording. All right. Here we go. Here's another one I highlighted. Again, I haven't read this book in months, so this is kind of like a refresher course for me too. It is said that what elevates a believer most in the eyes of God is what is most humiliating for his ego, and what humiliates a believer most in the eyes of God is what most elevates his ego. So, okay, you want to humiliate the ego, the nafs is what it is called in Islam. And what humiliates a believer most in the eyes of God is what most elevates his ego. So if you do what is best for your own ego, what satisfies your ego, that humiliates you most in the eyes of God. All right. Okay, let's see. Does this start at the beginning? A man came to Shibli. Shibli asked him, "What are you?" This was his way and habit. The man said, "I am the dot which is under the letter Ba." So Shibli said to him, "Has God caused what is witnessed by you to perish, or are you assigning a rank to yourself?" I think the reason I did this one is because the guy said, "I am the dot under the letter Ba." If you look at the Bismillah, starts, and the dot is below it. I know something, let me see if I can remember it. Something about you want to, from like a very like esoteric, mystical, Sufi perspective, I've read that you want to go from being the dot at the bottom of the ba, ascending to becoming the noon, the dot at the top of the noon. This is Arabic letter stuff. If you don't know it, then don't worry about this. But, yeah, so I think that's why I highlighted this, because it reminded me of that. And I remember also after reading this, it was just something that I kept in my mind. It stuck easily. If you want to just sort of humble yourself while you're on the dot below the letter ba, Anyways. Here we go. If the proud person disputes or debates, he disdains that he be refuted. If admonished, he loathes accepting it. But if he admonishes, he is harsh in his counsel. If some of his statements are refuted, he becomes angry. When he teaches, he is not kind to students. He derides them, chides them, reminds them of his favors upon them, and puts them to his service. He looks upon the masses as though he is looking upon a donkey, considering them ignorant and despising them. I highlighted this one because when reading this, it reminded me of myself. I know this is something I'm trying to change. Sometimes with my friends, I can be a little nasty and mean. And it's because I'm succumbing to this pride where I think I know everything. At least I think that's what it is. Maybe if I look more at myself, or if others tell me about it, I'd find maybe there's another reason. But I think it's just wanting to be smart, wanting to know everything. Getting mad when corrected. Anyways, all that kind of stuff. Let's see if I can even figure out what this one was. I wrote something in the margin, and it's very hard to read. What did I write here? He cannot give up envy, hasad, and there is conceit in this. He cannot give up counsel. I don't know. That one, I don't know what that was about. Okay. So now this is in a chapter that explains, I guess, the different types of the objects of pride, their degrees and categories. So I have here a passage. Ibn Mas'ud said, Sufficient and evil is it for a person who, when it is said to him, reverence God, says, mind your own business. So I highlighted this one because this is something you see all the time. Social media, you try to point out to a brother or a sister, oh, this haram, you shouldn't do that, or, what do you hear? It's very common here, mind your own business. So here we go. Sufficient and evil is it for a person who, when it is said, reverence God, says, mind your own business. We just, I wonder though if you have to be careful about being prideful in telling other people how to live the religious life. You could fall into pride in doing that, I think. So I guess, it's about your intention. Just, you gotta, maybe they don't know. I'm just letting you know this is blah, blah, blah. Here's the reason. Don't just go, haram, whatever. To this effect, Wahab, this is another passage, so Wahab gave an analogy. Knowledge is like rain that falls from the sky, sweet and pure. Trees absorb it at their roots and transfer it in accordance with their latent fruit. So the bitter fruits increase in bitterness, and the sweet fruits increase in sweetness. Likewise, people retain knowledge and transform it in accordance with their aspirations and passions, thus increasing the proud person in pride and the humble person in humility. I don't think I need to comment on that, but that's a nice passage. As for matters pertaining to religion, it is that the worshipper considers people as doomed, but considers himself as saved. In reality, whenever he thinks this, he is the one who is doomed. Okay, well, this passage right here sort of sums up what I was saying at the very beginning about, adopting religious life. You can succumb to trappings. You can succumb to pride. And here, as for matters pertaining to religion, it is that the worshipper considers people as doomed, but considers himself as saved. In reality, whenever he thinks this, he is the one who is doomed. So you walk around going, all these people, they don't even know, they don't care, they're all going to go burn in hell. I am not. Boom, right there. You are doomed. I can read a little bit more. Let's see. The Prophet ﷺ said, when you hear a person say, people shall perish, he is more worthy of perishing than them. He only said this because such a statement indicates that the person scorns God's creatures, is deluded about God, and feels safe from his ruse, being fearless of his onslaught. How can this person not be fearful, seeing that his despising of others suffices as an evil? The Messenger of God ﷺ said, sufficient an evil is it for a person that he despises his Muslim brother. So, there's something to keep in mind. All right, another passage here. Whoever firmly believes that he is above one of God's servants, all of his actions become nullified on account of his ignorance. Indeed, ignorance is the most atrocious of sins and the greatest thing that distances the servant from God. To judge oneself to be better than others is pure ignorance and the result of feeling safe from God's ruse. And none feel safe from God's ruse except those people who are lost. That is a passage from the Quran. I'm not going to go to the back right now to just figure out where. Should I? Should I give you guys the citation of where that was from? Hang on, it shouldn't be too hard. Where's the footnotes? I mean, not footnotes. Where's the notes? Oh my gosh, guys. I'm so sorry. This actually was hard. 22. Oh my god. Chapter 6. Note 22. That was from Surah 7, verse 99. What is 7? I should know this off the top of my head. The pressure of recording. You forget things. When you're on mic and you feel like you really have to say everything perfect. What's next? All right. Another little passage here. As for the scholars competing with others, this is when he exerts himself in debating so that he overcomes his opponents and does not overcome. He stays up all night and day in order to obtain sciences such as debating, disputation, speech embellishment, and speaking in rhymed prose, so as to adorn himself with them at gatherings. He memorizes obscure facts so that he may outdo his peers thereby and magnify himself in front of them. He memorizes prophetic traditions, their wordings and chains of transmissions, so that he can refute those who err in them. Thus he displays his own merit and the deficiencies of his peers, rejoicing whenever one of them errs, so that he may refute him. But it grieves him when his peer is correct and makes a good point, fearing that his peer would be seen as greater than him. So this reminded me of someone on YouTube. He's a Muslim debater, and I'm not going to backbite on him. I'm just saying it reminded me of him, this passage. And, I don't think anything bad of him. This just reminded me of him. But I think also the point of this, which has nothing to do with him, but I think, it's sort of gets to the thing of why are you seeking knowledge? Are you seeking knowledge to impress others? Are you seeking knowledge just to look good? Which is pride. That's what that is. Or are you seeking knowledge to just understand, to, understand God and everything? So, I don't think I need to say much more about that. Okay, to sum up, anything that is a blessing and can be thought of as a perfection, even if it's not hang on, let me start this over again. To sum up, anything that is a blessing and can be thought of as a perfection, even if it is not intrinsically a perfection, can be a reason for being proud. Anything that is a blessing that can be thought of as a blessing, even if it's not intrinsically a perfection, can be a reason for being proud. Let's keep reading here. Maybe it talks more. I don't really get what I highlighted this for. This can be the case to the extent that an effeminate person can be proud over his friends by virtue of his excessive knowledge of and his ability in being effeminate. That is because he sees it as a perfection and thus boasts of it, even if his actions will entail nothing but an exemplary punishment for him. Likewise is the case with a sinner who might boast over drinking much alcohol in the abundance of his depravity, involving women and youths. He is proud because of these, given his conjecture that they are perfections, even though he is wrong in this. Okay, I think, it's basically just saying, people think that they attain perfection in a state and they're proud of it, but even that thing that they're perfect in is a sin. It seems to be what that was saying. Oh, here we go. 2 on 1 page. I wonder what this is going to be. So this is under a heading called resentment. Resentment may be a cause of pride without self-admiration, as with the one who acts proudly towards someone whom he deems to be like him or above him, but with whom he had been angry for a reason prior to this. So his anger causes resentment, and his hatred becomes firmly rooted in his heart. It is for this reason that his ego will not yield to being humble towards this person, even if the person deserves to be shown humility by him. And how many a vile person is there whose ego does not yield to being humble towards one of the great ones on account of his resentment or hatred towards him? This causes him to 1. Reject the truth when it comes from the person whom he hates. 2. Disdain accepting his counsel. 3. Strive to gain precedence over him, even if he knows that he is not worthy to do so. 4. Consider it unlawful if the person is unjust towards him, although he would not seek pardon from him were he to do wrong. 5. Not ask the person that of which he is ignorant. I think the reason I highlighted this one is because I think, in a sense, it reminded me of the prophet and other prophets too. Because if you deal with atheists and stuff, it seems that they're, first of all, hang on, so this anger becomes, and his hatred becomes, for this reason that his ego will not yield to being humble towards this person. So you can be proud in your atheism, and, that's kind of reminds me of, خَتَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ. That in a sense, that might be like the sealing off that you read about in the Quran of the people's hearts to the message of revelation. If you're too proud, you're never going to listen anyways. You will never listen. So it takes humility to even begin living a religious life, in a sense. If you're too proud, you're not going to listen to anybody. You're not going to listen to the Word of God in the Quran. You're not going to listen to learned scholars. You're not going to listen to hadith, reliable narrators of hadith. So that's kind of why I think this is such a fundamental thing, this rooting out of pride. And, of course, standard thing to say is we live in a society that really encourages, being proud. So, all right, let's move on. This is under a heading of envy. Envy also necessitates hatred for the object of envy, even if on his side there is neither harm nor cause that demands anger and resentment against him. Envy also incites rejection of the truth to the point that one refuses to accept the object of envy's counsel and to learn from him. How many an ignoramus is there who desires knowledge but subsists in the filth of ignorance because he loathes to benefit from one of the people of his town or one of his relatives on account of his envy and enmity towards him? He thus turns away from him and acts proudly towards him, despite his knowledge that this person deserves to be shown humility by virtue of his knowledge. Envy, however, provokes him to treat this person as the proud do, even though internally he does not consider himself to be above him. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Imagine a situation where, an envious person doesn't want to approach the person of whom he is envious to learn, Anyway. Let's go. I think about halfway done here. So this is about garments. Let's see. The Prophet recognized that Thabit's inclination towards cleanliness and garments of fine quality was not so that he could be proud towards others. So that's all right. So love of such garments, garments of fine quality and cleanliness, is not necessarily due to pride, but it might be, just as contentment with lowly garments might be due to humility. The mark of a proud person is that he seeks to beautify himself when people see him, but has no care for his appearance when by himself. The mark of seeking beauty for itself is that one loves beauty in everything, even if one is alone, and even when in the private quarters of one's home. That is not due to pride. I had a friend who, not Muslim or anything, but this passage reminded me of him. At home, he was a very lazy, slovenly person, somewhat clean, but if it was, to go out, dress to impress, smell real nice, but like living quarters, just gross, So I think that is the pretension that they speak of here in this passage. And me, how did I sort of look at this for myself? I went through a phase of wanting to dress really nice all the time. Dress to impress. I used to get nice haircuts, treat it with oil and, style it nicely with a blow dryer and stuff. I don't do any of that anymore. And I'm trying to sort of mortify myself so as to avoid pride, but you can be prideful in your mortification. So that's something to be wary of. But basically, as a form of, way to withdraw from the dunya, I don't dress to impress anymore. I don't dress like a disgusting pig, and I am clean. But I just shave my head now at home. I just wear normal clothes. I don't dress very fancy. I look the same in the house as I do outside of the house, but I'm clean. I'm pure. I do ghusl and wudu. And I keep a clean house, you know what I'm saying? So I'm not dirty. I just don't put on airs. I just am trying to humble myself from the outside in, if that makes sense. Anyways. So there is no esteem and no elevation except in following him. Thus when Umar radiallahu anhu was censured for his shabby appearance upon entering Damascus, he said, "We are a people whom God has exalted through Islam, and we shall never seek greatness in other than it." So another reason that I can use just for my not just dressing, majestically or dressing to impress. It's because we are people whom God has exalted through Islam, and we shall never seek greatness in other than it. Don't seek greatness in brands or style. All right. So we're still in chapters having to do with pride. We are not into self-admiration yet. This is a footnote I put a note in. It says, in Islamic law, the term fard ayn denotes that which is personally incumbent upon every Muslim, such as performing the daily prayers, salat, or avoiding backbiting, ghibah. This is juxtaposed with the term fard kifaya, which denotes what is incumbent upon the Muslim community or ummah as a whole, the fulfillment of which by a small collective within the ummah relieves the burden of obligation upon the entire ummah. This would include things like the funeral prayer. It is not a personal obligation upon every Muslim to perform this prayer for a deceased person, but some Muslims must do so. Excuse me, guys. This I highlighted because I just learned that from that footnote. I heard people on YouTube say fard kifaya, and so when I finally read it, I'm like, oh, great, I understand exactly what that means now. Let's see. He who has this for a beginning, and these for states, how can he have vanity, pride, boastfulness, and ostentation? In reality, he is the most base of the base and the weakest of the weak, and this is the habit of he who is base. Okay, here we go. But this is the habit of he who is base. When he is raised above his baseness, he becomes stuck up and magnifies himself, and that proves his original baseness. There is neither power nor strength except through God. So I like this, yeah. So what can prove how base someone is? Well, when they are raised above their baseness, they become stuck up and magnified in themselves, which just proves how base you are. Kind of, yeah, so when you go from the when you go from the dot at the bottom of the letter ba to the noon at the top, if you are magnifying yourself and glorifying yourself in that, you really do belong just at the bottom of the ba. Or if you go from an atheistic life, irreligious life, or even in this case a non-Islamic life, to a religious Islamic life, and you think that this makes you just better in some way, that just proves that you're kind of a base person and you need to work on that, I suppose. Let's see. I'm just wondering if I should read a very long passage here. No, I think I'm going to skip, because this would be reading like 2 whole pages, and I know if I were listening to that, I would probably zone out. So I'm drinking green tea with mint. Have you seen the one who commits a crime against a king and is thus condemned to be whipped with 1,000 lashes on account of his crime? He is detained in prison while he waits to be taken out to the public and to be punished before a crowd of people. He does not know if he will be forgiven or not. How lowly would he be in prison? Do you think he would be proud towards anyone in the prison? There is no sinful servant, but that the world is his prison. He deserves to be punished by God, and he does not know how the end of his affair will be. This alone ought to suffice him by way of sorrow, fear, anxiety, despicability, and disgrace. All right. Let's see. It is said that prayer is the pillar of religion. In the prayer are secrets on account of which it is a pillar. Among its secrets is that it contains what entails humility, such as standing straight, bowing, and prostration. And I wrote a little note next to this, Salat Ahmad, and that doesn't mean the prayer of, Ahmad, like Ahmad ibn Hanbal, but something I heard Hamza Yusuf say once about the word Ahmad. If you speak Arabic or can read it, you know how it's spelled. Alif with a Hamza, Ha, Mim, Dal. The Aleph is kind of like the person standing up and about to pray. The Ha is like the ruku'. The Mim is the head on the ground for the prostration, and the Dal is the sajada. I'm pretty sure I got those terms right, but when you're just sitting up. Anyone curious about, just Google Ahmad and put it into Arabic and you'll see it written, and you can kind of see what I mean. Just remember, Arabic goes from right to left. All right. Boasting over that which does not contain in itself its permanent existence, and which entails an evil outcome and exemplary punishment in the afterlife, is the height of ignorance. Whatever is not up to you does not belong to you. And I wrote slave next to that. So I think slave, of course, in the sense of abd, meaning like, a slave to God. You're in submission, Islam, to God. So basically, whatever is not up to you does not belong to you. Cruising right along. Almost done. Okay. The sin of the scholar is greater than the sin of the layperson. The scholar should know that the proof of God is certainly against the learned. That what he tolerates from the ignoramus, he will not tolerate 1/10 of it from the scholar, and that whoever disobeys God, despite having knowledge, his crime is most atrocious, since he has not fulfilled the right of the blessing of knowledge that God has given to him. So scholars beware, but they know that if they're scholars. For his peril is greater. Is there a scholar who does not follow his desires? And is there a scholar who does not enjoin the good that he himself does not do? Whenever the greatness of his worth in comparison to that of the ignoramus occurs to the scholar, let him reflect on the grave peril that is facing him, for his peril is greater than the peril of others, just as his worth is greater than the worth of others. It works both ways. Such a person is like a king who places himself in danger because of his enemies. If he were to be captured and overcome, he would wish to be a poor person. How many a scholar will in the hereafter desire the salvation of the ignorant? We seek refuge in God from that. So, I think this was just speaking to me because I was really, I'm not saying I'm a scholar or about to be or anything, but I mean, I really am, especially at this time that I read this book, was trying very hard to learn as much as I could about Islam and many other things. It was, a few months ago was a big sort of, I've been moving in this direction, but a few months ago was a very, few months. So in Ramadan, this was in like April, was a very big sort of, what would you call it? Like a sea change or just a dramatic change. I changed many things in my life and was trying to learn a lot and build foundations to build more knowledge upon it. Anyways, so I think that's all this was speaking to me for that. Sorry if I'm rambling, guys. Or losing train of thought. It's just, I don't want to just read passages, so I try to add a little bit if I can. Thus, a servant must not be proud towards a single person. Indeed, if the scholar looks at an ignoramus, he should say, he disobeys God out of ignorance, whereas I disobey him with knowledge. So he has more of an excuse than me. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of, if you're learning, when you know something, and you know what you should or shouldn't do, you're more at fault when you don't do what you should do. It's kind of scary. It almost makes you want to not read anything about religion. May God reward you with the best, just as you have pointed this out to me. For wisdom is the stray camel of the believer, and when he finds it, it is appropriate to thank the one who directed him to it. If he persists in this a consecutive number of times, it will become his nature. The heaviness of accepting the truth from others will fall away from his heart, and accepting it will be easy for him. So yeah, this is kind of like about humbling yourself when learning from others. The more you just accept you were wrong about something, and that's someone more learned than you is actually teaching you correctly, the easier it becomes. Oh, we got a train coming. Here he's talking about a situation where pride and pretension are combined, and he says, what pertains to the public is due to pretension, and what pertains to the private is due to pride. This should be recognized, for whoever does not recognize an evil cannot guard against it, and whoever cannot discern an illness cannot cure it. So yeah, I think what we were talking about earlier, the pretension of, basically like being a slob at home, but looking neat and well put together outside of the home, is more about pretension. And so what would pride be in such a scenario? So if pretension is the outside and the private is pride, maybe, I don't know. Anyways, I may have just dug myself into a hole there, but anyway. Okay, so this starts on the previous page. Okay, we are into self-admiration. Chapters on that subject. A person may be self-admiring on account of an action in which he is wrong, just as he may be self-admiring on account of an action in which he is correct. The Prophet ﷺ said, there are three mortal vices: covetousness that is obeyed, a passion that is followed, and a person's admiration for himself. The Prophet said to Abu Tha'laba, I think, concerning the later generations of this community. When you see covetousness obeyed, passions followed, and each person admiring his own opinion, then worry for yourself. I mean, yeah, this is some years ago when I first started getting back into wanting to live a religious life. It was this following of the passions thing that I really tried to get under control. And you read, books like Libido Dominandi, political sexual liberation as political control. So, you become a slave to your passions. Not only then are you under the control of something and not free, but they pull you away from the good, And each person admiring in his own opinion. That's all of social media, man. Every little status, every little tweet, every little, I don't know if there's a word for post on Instagram, It's all just inflating the ego, pulling you away from humility. God has said, do not annul your acts of charity through favor reminding and injury. Favor reminding is the result of magnifying one's giving of charity and magnifying one's actions of self-admiration. Hang on, I'm sorry. Let me redo that. Favor reminding is the result of magnifying one's giving of charity and magnifying one's actions is self-admiration. It becomes clear by this that self-admiration is most blameworthy. So yeah, don't give charity to let other people see that you give charity, Just do it because it's... No, anyways. I'm no expert. I'm humbling myself here before you guys. I'm not a scholar. So anyways. Self-admiration causes him to laud, praise, and commend himself. If he is admired for his intelligence and knowledge, this prevents him from benefiting from others, seeking counsel and asking questions, for he totally relies upon himself and his own opinions, and loathes asking questions of those more knowledgeable than him. This kind of same thing came up earlier in just the pride section. But also, what did we just read here? For he totally relies upon himself and his own opinions. Now, this is the capitalist ideal man, self-sufficient, relying only on yourself and your own opinions to just go out there and win, So you could see how that type of personality that's built into the society around us is kind of scary too, It's almost like everything around you is set up, and I don't mean conspiratorially, I just mean like the design of it is, in the end, it pulls you into it, which is further away from the good, the pure, the religious. We are almost done. Okay. God's gradation in creation, bit by bit, is what causes you to imagine, and you are mistaken, that you bring your own actions into existence. The elucidation of this and how rewards are granted for actions that are created by God shall be elaborated upon in the Book of Gratitude. All right. So that's a book that I have not read yet. One of the strangest things is that you are impressed with yourself, but not with the one to whom belongs the entire affair, and that you are not impressed with his munificence, bounty, and generosity in preferring you above the sinful among his servants. For he imposed the causes that bring destruction upon these sinners, but diverted them from you. And he imposed wrongdoers and those who incite evil upon them, but diverted them from you. He placed them amid the causes of passions and pleasures, but kept these away from you. He diverted the sinners from the causes of good, but imposed them upon you, so that good is easy for you, whereas evil is easy for them. This passage spoke to me because my whole life story, when I got more serious about things and was looking at it more, felt like, I couldn't deny some sort of munificence, some guidance from Ar-Rahman. Since sins are divided into what can be interceded for and what cannot be interceded for, fear and apprehension are undoubtedly necessary. If intercession was accepted for every sin, the Quraysh would not have been ordered to obey the Prophet, and the Messenger of God would not have forbidden Fatima from disobedience. He would have allowed her to follow all pleasures so that she could have the fullness of enjoyment in this world, and then he would have interceded for her in the afterlife so that she could have the fullness of enjoyment there too. Okay. This is the last one in this book. So, here we go. Self-admiration on account of religious innovations is to deem good what is driven by passion and desire while presuming it to be true. And this reminded me of a passage in Al-Fiqh Al-Kabir of Imam Abu Hanifa, where he says, we do not charge any believer with unbelief for any sin he commits, even if it is an enormity, as long as he does not regard it as lawful. So, hang on one second. So in Al-Ghazali it said, anyways, this just comes up a lot. You know, if you see a Muslim sinning and they try to make excuses for it, whatever, it seems in Al-Fiqh al-Kabir, it seems to be saying it's when they try to say that it's not a sin, that the religion accepts it, that's where there's a problem. Obviously, you shouldn't sin, but it's a bigger thing to try and make it, part of the religion. I think everyone gets my point. All right. And as a footnote, there was a passage in the Al-Ghazali that I forgot to look up, but it reminded me of this Rumi poem that I highlighted here in a little book of Rumi poems. And it goes like this. I don't remember what the connection was, so I'm going to read it. It's very short. It's 3 lines. I'm going to read it and see if it just clicks, any sort of connection. On this wise did the Jew tell his dream. Oh, there is many a Jew whose end was praiseworthy. Do not spurn any infidel, for it may be hoped that he will die a Muslim. What knowledge have you of the close of his life, that you should once and for all avert your face from him? So, yeah, I think it was the second line. Do not spurn any infidel, for it may be hoped that he will die a Muslim. So it's kind of like, it kind of gets to the point of you don't know everything again, So you don't know God's plan, so if, you spurn any infidel, who knows, he may die a Muslim. This is just, you can tell people if they're wrong, but this is something to keep in mind. Me, I lived a raucous life. No, I'm reading Al-Ghazali and praying and fasting and, all that kind of stuff. And, it's just something to keep in mind. Anyways. Okay, thank you for listening. This is something, I've had this book highlighted for months, and I've wanted to do this. Tonight it feels like a bit of a wreck, this little recording session here. I hate the extra noise. I hate that I get trapped in wanting to add more, but I find myself just repeating and repeating and repeating. Other things I upload probably will not be this long. But I do plan on just sort of, going through things I find interesting, reading them, just talking about them. That's all. Very simple.